Before Zeus ruled from golden Olympus, before heroes walked the earth, before gods shaped human destiny, there was something else. Something primordial, something terrifying. The Greeks understood that creation was not a gentle act of divine love, but a violent, chaotic struggle born from darkness, betrayal, and unspeakable horror. This is the story they whispered in the shadows, the true genesis of their cosmos. A tale of cosmic cannibalism, castration, and primordial terror that would make even the gods themselves tremble. Welcome to the real beginning of everything. In the beginning, there was nothing, not darkness, for darkness implies the absence of light, and light had not yet been conceived, not silence, for silence suggests the cessation of sound, and sound had never existed. There was only chaos, the primordial void, the gaping emptiness that preceded all existence. Imagine, if you will, a state beyond comprehension. Chaos was not merely empty space waiting to be filled. It was the fundamental absence of order, of form, of meaning itself. The ancient poet Hesiod, writing in the 8th century BCE in his Theogony, described this primal state as a yawning gap, chaos, a cosmic wound in the fabric of nothingness itself. Within this void, there was no up or down, no here or there. Time itself had no meaning, for there were no events to mark its passage. It was a realm of infinite potential and absolute sterility, pregnant with possibility, yet utterly barren. The very concept challenges human understanding, for we who live in a world of substance and structure can barely conceive of such fundamental emptiness. Yet from this nothingness, something stirred, not through divine will or cosmic design, but through some incomprehensible necessity that defies mortal logic. The void began to birth existence, not gently, but with the violence of reality tearing itself into being. From chaos came the first conscious entities, beings so fundamental that they were less characters than living embodiments of cosmic principles. First came Gaia, the earth herself, not the gentle mother goddess of later mythology, but something far more primal and terrible. Gaia was not born as a nurturing maternal figure, but as raw, fertile earth, hungry, demanding, and utterly alien to human understanding. Picture her emergence, the slow coalescence of matter into solid form, mountains thrusting up from nothingness, vast continents spreading like wounds across the void. Gaia was not beautiful in any human sense. She was powerful, overwhelming, and utterly indifferent to the concepts of mercy or compassion that would later define divine morality. She was the earth in all its terrible fecundity, earthquakes and volcanic eruptions, the crushing weight of stone, and the slow, inevitable decay that returns all life to soil. Simultaneously, Tartarus came into being, not a place, but a conscious entity embodying the deepest, most terrifying depths of existence. If Gaia was the surface reality, Tartarus was the abyss beneath, darker than the darkest night, deeper than the deepest ocean. Ancient sources describe Tartarus as lying as far beneath the earth as the sky is above it, a cosmic prison of unimaginable depths where even the gods feared to tread. The very air around these primordial beings crackled with raw power. When Gaia shifted, continents moved. When Tartarus stirred, the foundations of reality trembled. These were not gods as mortals would later understand them, but forces of nature given consciousness, cosmic principles made manifest in forms that strained the boundaries of existence itself. From the primordial void also came Erebus, the personification of darkness itself, not merely the absence of light, but aggressive, living shadow that existed before light was ever conceived. Erebus was darkness with purpose, darkness with consciousness, darkness that could think and hunger and desire. His very presence was suffocating, a black tide that consumed hope and possibility with equal appetite. His consort was Nyx, night personified. Where Erebus was the darkness of depth and concealment, Nyx was the darkness of time, the black veil that separates day from day, moment from moment. Together, they represented the fundamental unknowability of existence, the spaces between thoughts, the moments between heartbeats, the eternal silence between words. Their union was not romantic, but cosmic necessity, the marriage of two aspects of the same terrifying truth. Their coupling was the first cosmic marriage, and from it came something unprecedented: Aether, the bright upper air, and Hemera, the day. For the first time, light existed, not as the gentle illumination we know, but as something violent and alien, a stark contrast that threw the darkness into sharp relief. The birth of light did not banish darkness, it gave darkness meaning by providing something to oppose. This was the first great paradox of Greek creation. Light was born from darkness, order emerged from chaos, consciousness arose from the void. The Greeks understood that creation was not a progression from darkness to light, but an eternal dance between opposing forces, each giving meaning to the other. In this cosmic ballet, neither light nor darkness could claim victory, for victory would mean the end of existence itself. With the basic elements of existence now in place, the cosmos was ready for its first ruler. But what emerged from this primordial landscape was not the wise, benevolent deity one might expect. Instead, the first king of the universe was Uranus, the sky, and his reign would be marked by paranoia, cruelty, and acts of violence that would echo through all subsequent generations of gods. Gaia, in her fertile abundance, gave birth to Uranus, the starry sky, without the need for a mate. This was parthenogenesis on a cosmic scale, the earth birthing the heavens from her own substance. But what should have been a beautiful moment of creation was tinged with something darker. Uranus emerged not as Gaia's child, but as her equal, and immediately, inevitably, he became her husband. The marriage of earth and sky was the first sacred union in the cosmos, but it was also the first cosmic dysfunction. Uranus spread himself across Gaia, covering her completely, joining with her in eternal, inescapable embrace. Day and night, season after season, year after year, Uranus pressed down upon his mother wife, preventing her from breathing freely, from moving according to her own will. This was not the romantic union of later mythologies, but something primal and oppressive. Gaia, who had known the freedom of the void, now found herself constantly covered, constantly penetrated, constantly impregnated by her own offspring. The sky pressed down upon the earth with suffocating weight, and from this union came children, but children born into a world where their father's jealousy and paranoia would shape their entire existence. From the union of Gaia and Uranus came the first generation of truly divine beings, the Titans, 12 in number, They represented the fundamental forces that would shape reality itself. But their birth was not a celebration. It was the beginning of cosmic tragedy. Each birth was a violent eruption from the earth, as if Gaia herself was being torn apart to bring forth these mighty beings. First came Oceanus, the great river that encircled the world, not the gentle streams known to mortals, but a vast primordial flood that marked the boundaries of existence itself. His wife was Tethys, the source of all fresh water, and together they would parent the 3,000 river gods and 3,000 ocean nymphs that would spread across the earth. When Oceanus first drew breath, the sound was like a tsunami roaring across endless shores. Then came Koios and Phoebe, the axis of heaven and the bright intellect, representing the cosmic order and divine wisdom. Their union would eventually produce Leto, who would bear Apollo and Artemis to Zeus. But in these early days, they were forces of raw cosmic organization, imposing structure on the chaotic universe their grandparents had birthed from the void. Crius embodied the constellations and the measuring of time, while Hyperion was the light that travels, not the gentle sunlight of later ages, but the piercing, revealing light that exposes all secrets. His wife Thea was the divine light itself, and their children would be Helios the sun, Selene the moon, and Eos the dawn. When Hyperion first opened his eyes, stars ignited across the cosmos. Most significant among the Titans were Rhea and Cronus. Rhea represented the flow of time and the fertility of generations, while Cronus, whose name would become synonymous with time itself, was the youngest and most cunning of the Titans. Even in his birth, there was something different about Cronus, something that suggested he would not accept the cosmic order as it stood. His first cry was not the wail of an infant, but the sound of destiny itself taking shape. But the Titans were not Uranus and Gaia's only offspring. From their union also came beings so terrible that their very existence challenged the order of the cosmos. First were the three Cyclopes, not the simple, one-eyed giants of later tales, but primordial forces of cosmic craftsmanship. Their births shook the foundations of reality, for they came into existence already knowing secrets that even their parents had never learned. Brontes was thunder itself, not the sound that follows lightning, but the fundamental cosmic force that shakes the foundations of reality. Steropus was lightning, the blinding flash that reveals truth and strikes down the unworthy. Argus was the bright flash, the moment of terrible illumination that burns itself into memory forever. Each possessed a single eye in the center of his forehead, not a deformity, but a mark of their essential nature. Where mortals see with two eyes and perceive duality, division and conflict, the Cyclops saw with perfect unity, perceiving the single truth that underlies all apparent contradictions. Their vision could penetrate to the heart of matter itself, allowing them to forge weapons that could split atoms and reshape reality. When they first gazed upon the cosmos, the universe itself flinched under their terrible scrutiny. But even more terrifying were the three Hecatoncheires, the hundred-handed ones. Cottus, Briareus, and Aegus were not merely giants, but embodiments of overwhelming force. Each possessed 50 heads and 100 arms, representing not multiplication, but the infinite possibilities of action and thought. Imagine encountering such beings, each head thinking independently, each mouth speaking different words, each arm moving with its own purpose, yet all coordinated by a single, vast intelligence that dwarfed mortal comprehension. They were not chaotic. They were order so complex it appeared as chaos to lesser minds. Their very existence suggested that the universe was far stranger and more multifaceted than it appeared. When the hecatoncheires first stirred, the sound was like a mountain range coming to life, a symphony of stone and sinew that announced the birth of cosmic terror. But Uranus looked upon these children, both the majestic Titans and the awesome Cyclopes and hecatoncheires, and felt not pride but terror. Here were beings whose power might one day rival or even exceed his own. In the Titans, he saw the potential for rebellion. In the Cyclopes, he saw the forge masters who could create weapons capable of overthrowing gods. In the hecatoncheires, he saw forces of change that could reshape the cosmos itself. Uranus's fear was not irrational, it was prophetic. Some cosmic instinct told him that among these children lay the seeds of his own destruction. But rather than face this threat with wisdom or courage, Uranus chose the path of tyranny. One by one, as each monstrous child was born, he seized them in his cosmic grip and thrust them back into their mother's womb, not gently, but with violence that shook the foundations of reality. Picture this cosmic horror. Beings of divine power, crafted for glory and cosmic purpose, being forced back into the darkness of their mother's depths. The Cyclopes, whose single eyes had beheld the structure of reality itself, were thrust into absolute darkness. The hecatoncheires, whose 100 arms were meant to shape the cosmos, found themselves imprisoned in cramped, suffocating confinement. And Gaia felt every moment of this torment. Each child forced back into her depths was a wound that never healed, a constant agony that grew worse with each passing day. The earth herself began to groan under the weight of the imprisoned gods, her surface cracking and buckling as the bound Titans, Cyclopes, and hecatoncheires struggled against their confinement. Mountains split apart from the internal pressure, oceans boiled with her rage, the very air grew thick with her suffering. Yet Uranus felt no remorse, only relief that his throne was secure. In his arrogance, he believed he had solved the problem of succession forever. He did not understand that by committing this cosmic crime, he had sown the seeds of his own destruction in the fertile soil of his wife's infinite wrath. The cosmos now teetered on the edge of catastrophe. Gaia suffered under the double burden of Uranus's constant, oppressive presence and the agony of her imprisoned children writhing within her depths. The very foundations of reality groaned under this strain. Something had to give, and when it did, the violence would reshape the universe forever. Deep within the earth, Gaia's pain transformed into something far more dangerous, divine wrath. This was not human anger, which burns hot and quickly fades, but cosmic fury that could reshape reality itself. Day by day, as Uranus continued his oppressive rule, and her children remained imprisoned within her, Gaia's rage grew into something that threatened the stability of existence itself. Volcanoes erupted spontaneously from her fury. Earthquakes split the ground in patterns that spelled out her anguish. She began to plot, not with the simple cunning of mortals, but with the vast geological patience of the earth itself. Mountains rose and fell as she considered her options. Ocean floors shifted as she weighed possibilities. The very climate began to change as her anger affected the fundamental forces of nature. Ice ages came and went in moments as her emotions fluctuated between cold calculation and burning rage. Finally, Gaia made her decision. From within her depths, she drew forth a new substance, not common earth or stone, but adamant, a metal harder than diamond, sharper than obsidian, more durable than the foundations of reality itself. With cosmic force and maternal fury, she shaped this adamant into a weapon, a sickle whose curved blade could cut through anything, even the flesh of gods. The sickle was not merely a tool, but a manifestation of inevitable change. Its edge was so sharp it could slice through time itself. With the weapon prepared, Gaia called her imprisoned children to counsel. Through the layers of earth and stone, through the boundaries between freedom and captivity, her voice reached the Titans. Not all could answer. The Cyclopes and Hecatoncheires were bound too deeply, their prison too secure. But the 12 Titans heard their mother's call, and felt her rage resonating through their very essence. "My children," Gaia's voice rumbled through the foundations of the world, causing earthquakes across the surface. "Your father's cruelty has gone beyond all bounds. He fears your strength, and so denies you your rightful place in the cosmos. But I offer you a chance for freedom and for justice. The choice is yours, but choose quickly, for my patience grows thin and my rage grows hot." The Titans understood immediately what she proposed. This was not merely escape from their underground prison, but revolution against the cosmic order itself. They would be overthrowing the first king of the universe, challenging the authority of their own father, unleashing forces that could never be controlled or contained. The implications terrified them. Such an act would shatter every concept of divine order that had ever existed. 11 of the Titans recoiled from such a prospect. Despite their imprisonment, despite their suffering, the magnitude of what Gaia proposed horrified them. They were divine beings, but they were also children, and the thought of raising a hand against their father, even such a father as Uranus, filled them with cosmic dread. The very stones around them wept at their anguish. But Cronus, youngest, cleverest, most ambitious of the Titans, felt no such hesitation. Where his brothers saw horror, he saw opportunity. Where they saw impossible transgression, he saw inevitable necessity. "I will do it, mother," he said, his voice carrying the inexorable certainty of time itself. "I will free us all, and I will make him pay for every moment of our suffering." As evening approached, and Uranus prepared for his nightly union with Gaia, neither god nor mortal suspected that this night would witness the most shocking act of violence in cosmic history. The stars wheeled overhead in their eternal patterns, unaware that before dawn they would have a new master. The very air seemed to hold its breath, as if the universe itself sensed the approaching catastrophe. Cronus emerged from his underground prison, the adamantine sickle gleaming in his hand like a fragment of fallen star. His form was magnificent and terrible, not yet the paranoid tyrant he would become, but a young god in the full flower of divine power, his eyes burning with righteous fury and ambitious hunger in equal measure. Every step he took left cracks in the earth, for the ground itself could barely contain the force of his determination. He concealed himself at the very spot where Uranus would descend to embrace Gaia, positioning himself with the patience and precision of time itself. Hours passed like heartbeats, the night deepened. And then, with the inevitability of cosmic law, Uranus began his descent. The sky god came down spread wide across the earth, covering every mountain and valley, every ocean and plain. His attention was focused entirely on Gaia, on the eternal act of union that had defined his existence since the beginning of time. He noticed nothing else, not the strange tension in the air, not the way the earth seemed to hold its breath, not the gleam of adamantine metal in the darkness. In his arrogance, he believed himself untouchable, beyond the reach of any power in the cosmos. He had never been more wrong. What happened next was swift, brutal, and irreversible. As Uranus pressed down upon Gaia in his familiar embrace, Cronus struck with the speed of falling lightning and the precision of cosmic justice. The adamantine sickle sliced through divine flesh as easily as it might cut morning mist, severing Uranus's genitals in a single, perfect arc. The weapon's edge was so sharp that for a moment Uranus felt nothing, continuing his embrace as if nothing had happened. Then the scream began. Not sound, but cosmic trauma, a wound torn in the fabric of reality itself. Uranus's agony reverberated through every dimension of existence. Mountains shook, oceans boiled, and the very stars flickered in sympathy with their master's pain. This was not merely physical mutilation, but the fundamental disruption of the cosmic order. The sound of his anguish could be heard in dimensions that had no names, felt by beings that had never existed. As Uranus recoiled in shock and horror, pulling himself away from the earth forever, his severed genitals fell toward the ground. But this divine flesh did not simply decay, it transformed, becoming a source of new and terrible power. Where the blood droplets struck the ground, they gave birth to new and terrible beings, each one a living reminder that the natural order had been violated forever. The Furies emerged from this divine gore: Alecto, Megara, and Tisiphone, goddesses of vengeance with brass wings, eyes that wept blood, and hair writhing with serpents. These were not merely spirits of punishment, but embodiments of cosmic justice itself. Their very existence proclaimed that the bonds between parent and child, ruler and subject, heaven and earth had been severed forever. They would spend eternity pursuing those who committed the most heinous crimes, particularly violence against family members. From the same blood came the giants, massive beings born fully armed for war against the gods. Their purpose was written in their very DNA: to challenge divine authority, to prove that even the mightiest gods were not beyond the reach of consequences. Each giant was a walking siege engine, a testament to the violent birth of the new cosmic order. But the most significant birth was yet to come. The severed genitals of Uranus fell into the sea, and there, amid the foam and spray of the wine-dark waters, they began a transformation that would change the nature of love itself. The sea around them began to churn and bubble, not with violence, but with creative power. The very water seemed to sing with anticipation, as something unprecedented took shape beneath the waves. From this divine foam, Aphras in ancient Greek, emerged Aphrodite, goddess of love and beauty. But this was not the gentle, romantic figure of later art and poetry. This Aphrodite was primordial, terrible, and magnificent. Love as a cosmic force, beauty as a weapon of gods, desire as a power that could reshape reality. Her birth was attended by phenomena that had never been seen before and would never be seen again. She rose from the waves fully formed, her beauty so intense it caused the sea itself to still in reverence. Every drop of water that touched her skin became a pearl. Every wave that lapped at her feet became silver foam. But her eyes held something that spoke of her violent birth, a knowledge that love and death, creation and destruction, pleasure and pain were inextricably linked. In her gaze, mortals would one day see their own doom and call it bliss. Aphrodite's emergence marked a fundamental shift in the cosmos. Where once there had been only the crude, oppressive sexuality of Uranus, forcing himself upon Gaia, now there was something more complex. Love that could inspire and destroy, beauty that could elevate and damn, desire that could create worlds or tear them apart. She was born from violence, but she was not violent. She was born from horror, but she was beautiful beyond description. The goddess stepped onto the shore at Cyprus, and where her feet touched the sand, flowers bloomed instantaneously. But these were not gentle garden flowers. They were exotic, intoxicating blooms whose beauty was so intense it was almost painful to behold. Birds fell silent in the sky, overwhelmed by her presence. Even the Furies, born from the same act of violence, paused in their eternal hunt to witness this moment of terrible beauty. For in Aphrodite's birth, the cosmos learned that from the greatest horror could come the greatest wonder. With Uranus castrated and fled to the furthest reaches of the sky, never again to press close to the earth, Cronus became the undisputed ruler of the cosmos. He freed his siblings from their underground prison and established what would later be remembered as the Golden Age, a time of peace, prosperity, and cosmic harmony. But even in triumph, the seeds of future tragedy were already taking root in the fertile soil of divine ambition. The freeing of the Titans was a moment of cosmic celebration that had never been seen before and would never be seen again. As Cronus used his adamantine sickle to break the bonds that held his siblings beneath the earth, each liberation was like the birth of a new star. The very foundations of reality sang with joy as these mighty beings tasted freedom for the first time in eons. Oceanus emerged first, and immediately the seas began to flow in their proper courses. Rivers found their paths to the ocean, springs bubbled up from hidden depths, and rain fell in gentle patterns that nourished rather than destroyed. His reunion with Tethys created the first moment of pure joy the cosmos had ever witnessed. Their embrace generated 3,000 river gods and 3,000 ocean nymphs, each one a celebration of water's life-giving power. Hyperion came forth bearing light itself, and for the first time since creation began, illumination served purpose rather than mere opposition to darkness. His light was warm, revealing, life-giving. When he embraced Thea, their combined radiance drove back shadows, not through violence, but through the simple power of shared love. From their union would come Helios, Selene, and Eos, the cosmic lights that would guide all future generations. One by one, the Titans took their places in the cosmic order. Koios and Phoebe established the first true wisdom. creating the foundations of knowledge and prophecy. Cronus set the constellations in their proper courses, giving order to time itself. Mnemosyne became the living memory of the cosmos, ensuring that nothing of importance would be forgotten. Each Titan's freedom was a gift to existence itself, bringing order and purpose to a cosmos that had known only oppression. Under Cronus's rule, the world experienced unprecedented peace and prosperity. This was the golden age sung by poets, a time when death was unknown, when the earth gave forth its bounty without labor, when gods and mortals lived in harmony. But the mortals of this age were not yet the humans we know. They were the golden race, beings crafted by the Titans themselves to be companions rather than subjects. These first mortals lived for thousands of years, never aging beyond the prime of life, never knowing sickness or sorrow. They required no labor, for the earth spontaneously produced everything they needed. Grain grew without planting, fruit ripened without cultivation, honey flowed from hollow trees, and streams of milk and wine bubbled up from the ground. The very air was perfumed with the scent of eternal spring, and the climate was so perfect that no shelter was needed. The golden race spent their days in contemplation, art, and celebration, living in perfect harmony with their divine creators. They composed songs that could make flowers bloom and stones weep. They crafted sculptures so lifelike that birds would try to nest in marble trees. They told stories that became real as they were spoken, filling the world with wonders that existed nowhere else in the cosmos. Cronus himself was transformed by power. The violent young god who had castrated his father became a wise, benevolent ruler. He established laws based on cosmic harmony rather than fear, created institutions that served all beings rather than just the powerful, and brought order to the universe without oppression. His palace atop Mount Othrys was a marvel of divine architecture, its halls filled with the music of the spheres and the laughter of the blessed. Yet even in this paradise, careful observers might have noticed troubling signs. Cronus's rule, though just, was absolute. His word was cosmic law, and no appeal was possible. The adamantine sickle that had freed the cosmos became a symbol of his authority, a reminder that his power was based on the most violent act in divine history. And in the deepest chambers of his palace, the weapon gleamed with an inner light that spoke of hunger for more blood. But the cosmos has its own laws, deeper than any ruler's decree. Cosmic justice demands that all debts be paid, all patterns completed, all cycles fulfilled. And so it was that Gaia, despite having instigated Uranus's overthrow, came to Cronus with words that would shatter his perfect world. The Earth Mother's visit to Mount Othrys was like an earthquake in the realm of the gods. The prophecy she delivered was simple in its wording, but devastating in its implications. As you overthrew your father, so shall you be overthrown by one of your own children. The cosmic pattern demands completion, and the violence you began cannot be stopped. The sickle that freed you will forge the chains of your own destruction. Cronus received this news in his throne room, surrounded by the symbols of his cosmic authority. The weight of the prediction struck him like a physical blow. He who had brought order to chaos, peace to conflict, harmony to discord, was destined to face the same fate he had inflicted on Uranus. The irony was cosmic in its scope. Divine justice expressing itself through the very pattern he had established. But whereas Uranus had tried to prevent his overthrow through imprisonment, Cronus conceived a more direct solution. If his children were destined to overthrow him, then his children must never be allowed to grow to maturity. If the pattern demanded completion, he would break the pattern itself. The Golden Age ruler began to plan an act so terrible it would make his own patricide seem merciful by comparison. From that moment, Cronus was a changed being. The wise, benevolent king became suspicious, paranoid, consumed by the fear of his own destiny. He began to watch his wife Rhea with new eyes, seeing not his beloved consort, but the potential mother of his destroyer. Every smile she gave him seemed to hide treachery. Every word she spoke might conceal rebellion. The Golden Age continued, but its king had become a prisoner of his own terror. When Rhea bore her first child, Hestia, goddess of the hearth and home, Cronus was ready. The moment the infant drew her first breath, her father snatched her from her mother's arms. What happened next was an act so horrific that it poisoned the very foundations of divine society. Without hesitation, without mercy, Cronus opened his mouth and swallowed his newborn daughter whole. The act was not quick. Hestia was immortal, divine, eternal. She could not die, could not be destroyed, could only be imprisoned within her father's body. As she slid down his throat, still crying, still reaching for her mother, the sound of her anguish echoed through the halls of Mount Othrys. Rhea's scream of horror and rage shook the foundations of the mountain itself. But Cronus felt only relief. The prophecy spoke of children overthrowing him, but this child would never grow, never challenge his authority, never raise a hand against her father. She would remain forever an infant, forever powerless, forever trapped within the prison of his divine flesh. He had found the perfect solution to an impossible problem. Or so he believed. Rhea pleaded with him, begged him to release their daughter, but Cronus was unmoved. The prophecy must not be fulfilled, he declared, his voice carrying the terrible authority of absolute power. Our children are too dangerous to be allowed freedom. This is the only way to preserve the order we have built. When Demeter was born, goddess of the harvest and fertility, the same horrific scene repeated itself. Then Hera, queen of the gods, shared the same fate. Each birth became a tragedy, each child a victim of their father's paranoid terror. The Golden Age continued on the surface, but at its heart was a rotting core of familial horror that grew stronger with each act of paternal cannibalism. By the time Rhea was pregnant with her sixth child, she could bear no more. 5 of her children lay trapped within Cronus's body, crying out to her in dreams, pleading for rescue that she was powerless to provide. The goddess of fertility and time's flow had become a prisoner in her own palace, watched constantly by a husband who saw her only as a vessel for potential threats. But Rhea was not merely the mother of gods. She was time itself, the flow of moments and seasons, the power that brings all things to their destined conclusion. And time, she knew, was on her side. Cronus might be the king of the cosmos, but even kings must bow to the inexorable passage of time. She began to plan, not with the hot fury of immediate revenge, but with the patient cunning of eternity itself. As her labor approached, Rhea made a secret journey to Crete, to a hidden cave where the earth's power ran strongest. There, in darkness and secrecy, she gave birth to Zeus, the child who would be king of gods and mortals alike. But unlike his siblings, Zeus would not face the horror of his father's jaws. Rhea had prepared a deception that would change the course of cosmic history. She wrapped a stone in swaddling clothes, disguising it as the newborn infant. The deception was perfect in every detail, from the weight of the bundle to the faint warmth that seemed to emanate from within. When she returned to Mount Othrys, Rhea presented this false child to Cronus with all the apparent resignation of a mother who had accepted her fate. Her performance was flawless, her despair seemingly genuine. Cronus, consumed by paranoia and the habit of horror, did not hesitate. He seized the bundle from Rhea's arms and swallowed it whole, stone and swaddling clothes together. The deception worked perfectly. Cronus felt the familiar satisfaction of another threat eliminated, another potential rebellion crushed before it could begin. He had no idea that his true son was growing to manhood in a cave far from Mount Othrys, nursed by nymphs and raised by the wild itself. In the hidden cave of Crete, Zeus grew with supernatural speed and divine purpose. The nymphs who raised him fed him on ambrosia and nectar, the food of the gods, while the sounds of his crying were masked by the Curetes, warrior priests who clashed their shields and spears in wild dances. Every aspect of his upbringing was designed to prepare him for the destiny that awaited him, the overthrow of the most powerful being in the cosmos. As Zeus matured, his power became evident in ways that defied all natural law. Lightning danced at his fingertips, thunder followed his footsteps, and eagles gathered at his call. The very air around him crackled with divine energy, and when he spoke, the cave itself seemed to listen. He was being shaped not just by divine nature, but by cosmic necessity itself. When Zeus reached manhood, Rhea finally revealed the truth of his birth and the horror of his siblings' fate. The young god's rage at learning of his father's crimes was like a thunderstorm given consciousness. Lightning scarred the cave walls, and his roar of fury echoed across the island of Crete. But his anger was tempered by divine wisdom and strategic thinking that marked him as truly his grandfather's heir. Zeus understood that direct confrontation with Cronus would be suicide. His father was the master of time itself, a being who had ruled the cosmos for eons and commanded powers that could reshape reality. Victory would require not just strength, but cunning, allies, and a plan so audacious that even the fates themselves would be surprised. The young god began to prepare for a war that would decide the fate of all existence. He sought out Métis, the Titaness of wisdom and cunning, daughter of Oceanus and Tethys. If anyone could devise a way to defeat the seemingly invincible Cronus, it would be she whose very name meant divine intelligence. Their meeting was the collision of two cosmic forces, the raw power of the future king and the refined wisdom of primordial cunning. Together, they would craft a plan that would free the devoured gods and reshape the universe forever. Métis' plan was elegant in its simplicity and terrifying in its implications. She would create a potion, an emetic so powerful that not even the king of the Titans could resist its effects. But this was no mere medicine. It was a weapon forged from the fundamental forces of cosmic rebellion, designed to turn Cronus's own body against him. Every ingredient was chosen not just for its physical properties, but for its symbolic power over tyranny and oppression. Zeus disguised himself as a cupbearer and infiltrated Mount Othrys during a great feast celebrating another year of Cronus's reign. The palace was filled with Titans and their offspring, all celebrating the continuing stability of the Golden Age. None suspected that among the servants moved the future king of the gods, carrying with him the means of cosmic revolution. The irony was perfect. Cronus would be undone by the very hospitality that marked his benevolent rule. As Cronus raised his cup in a toast to another year of peace and prosperity, Zeus stepped forward to refill it. For a moment, father and son stood face to face, neither recognizing the other. Cronus saw only a servant. Zeus saw the monster who had devoured his siblings. The moment stretched like eternity as Zeus poured the poisoned wine, knowing that the next few minutes would determine the fate of all existence. Cronus drank deeply, savoring what he believed was the finest wine in his collection. For a few moments nothing happened. The feast continued, the laughter echoed through the halls, and the king of the Titans smiled with satisfaction at his perfect world. Then the potion began its work. The first convulsion struck him like lightning, doubling him over with pain that transcended the merely physical. What followed was the most shocking sight in divine history. Cronus, the mighty king of the cosmos, began to vomit up his own children. First came the stone he had swallowed in place of Zeus, then Poseidon, then Hades, then his 3 daughters in reverse order of their consumption. Each divine child emerged fully grown, fury blazing in their eyes, ready for war against the father who had imprisoned them in living darkness. The Titanomachy, the war between the Titans and the Olympians, lasted for 10 years and reshaped the very structure of reality. This was not merely a conflict between generations of gods, but a cosmic struggle between the old order and the new, between the static perfection of the Golden Age and the dynamic chaos of change. The battlefields were not earthly planes, but the fundamental forces of existence itself. Zeus and his siblings established their base on Mount Olympus, while Cronus and most of the Titans fought from Mount Othrys. The war split families and shattered alliances that had endured since the dawn of time. Oceanus and Tethys remained neutral, as did Rhea, who could not bring herself to fight against either her husband or her children. But most of the Titans chose loyalty to Cronus over submission to the younger gods. The battles were beyond mortal comprehension. When Zeus hurled his thunderbolts, mountains vaporized. When Poseidon struck the earth with his trident, continents shifted. When Hades opened passages to the underworld, entire armies disappeared into darkness. The Titans responded with powers equally devastating. Hyperion's light could blind for eternity, Creus could stop time itself, and Cronus wielded temporal forces that could age his enemies to dust. For 10 years, neither side could gain decisive advantage. The Olympians had youth and fury on their side, but the Titans possessed experience and mastery over cosmic forces. The war might have continued forever, locked in eternal stalemate, But Zeus remembered the allies Cronus had forgotten. Deep in Tartarus, the Cyclopes and Hecatoncheires still languished in their ancient prison, waiting for someone to remember their suffering. Zeus descended into the deepest pit of existence and broke the bonds that Uranus had forged and Cronus had maintained. The Cyclopes emerged with gratitude beyond measure, and in return for their freedom, they forged weapons that would tip the balance of cosmic war. For Zeus, they created the thunderbolt, for Poseidon the trident, for Hades the helmet of invisibility. Each weapon was a masterpiece of cosmic engineering, capable of channeling the fundamental forces of reality itself. Armed with their new weapons and allied with the Hecatoncheires, whose 100 arms could hurl boulders like rain, the Olympians launched their final assault on Mount Othrys. The battle that followed was so intense it threatened to tear apart the fabric of space and time itself. Reality groaned under the strain of cosmic forces unleashed without restraint or mercy. Zeus's thunderbolts struck with the force of exploding stars, each one capable of reducing a mountain to cosmic dust. The Hecatoncheires hurled projectiles with such fury that the sky itself seemed to rain stone and metal. Poseidon's trident split the earth, creating chasms so deep they reached the very foundations of existence. The assault was overwhelming, irresistible, final. One by one, the Titans fell. Some were struck down by lightning, others overwhelmed by the impossible mathematics of hundred-handed warfare. The few who survived the initial onslaught found themselves facing Zeus himself, no longer the hidden child of Crete, but the fully realized king of a new cosmic order. His power was not just divine, but inevitable, the force of destiny itself made manifest. The final confrontation between Zeus and Cronus was both intimate and cosmic in scope. Father faced son across a battlefield littered with the debris of a shattered age. For a moment, they spoke not as king and rebel, but as family members whose love had been poisoned by fear and prophecy. Then the moment passed, and the universe held its breath as 2 generations of divine kingship prepared for final battle. The fight lasted only minutes, but felt like eons. Cronus unleashed the full power of time itself, trying to age Zeus into nothingness or trap him in temporal loops. But Zeus was beyond such attacks now, empowered not just by his own divine nature, but by the justice of his cause and the support of cosmic forces that demanded change. His final thunderbolt struck Cronus down, ending the reign of the Titans forever. As the smoke cleared over the battlefield of Othrys, a new age began. Zeus stood victorious, but his triumph was tempered by the knowledge of what victory had cost. The Golden Age was over, the age of innocence ended, and the cosmos would never again know the simple certainties that had defined existence under Titan rule. The age of the Olympians had begun, and with it, an era of complexity, conflict, and change that would define all future existence. And so ends the true story of Greek creation, not the sanitized myths told to children, but the raw, violent truth that the ancient Greeks understood all too well. Creation was not a gift freely given, but a prize violently seized. Order emerged not from chaos but through chaos, paid for in blood and suffering that echoed through every generation of gods and mortals. The pattern established in these primordial times would repeat throughout divine history. Sons would overthrow fathers, children would rebel against parents, and each generation would pay the price for the violence of those who came before. The castration of Uranus, the cannibalism of Cronus, the war of the Titans, these were not ancient aberrations, but the foundational truths of existence itself. When Zeus finally took his throne atop Mount Olympus, he carried with him the weight of this terrible history. He had won his crown through patricide and war, and he would rule knowing that the same fate awaited him if he followed the path of his predecessors. The sickle that had freed the Titans still existed, waiting in the cosmic darkness for the next revolution to begin. This is the terrifying truth the Greeks never forgot. Before there were heroes, before there was hope, before there was redemption, there was only the endless cycle of violence that gave birth to the cosmos. And in understanding this truth, they understood something fundamental about existence itself. That even gods are mortal, that even kings must fall, and that the price of power is always paid in blood. The age of the Olympians would bring its own stories, its own triumphs and tragedies. But it would never escape the shadow of what came before, the terrifying truth about Greek creation that still echoes in every myth, every legend, every story of divine power and mortal suffering. For in the beginning there was nothing, and from that nothing, through violence and horror beyond imagination, came everything we know. This is the real genesis of the Greek cosmos. This is the truth they whispered in the darkness. This is the story of before the gods.